Hey everybody, today I'll be doing a video on my Beretta Px4 Storm. I've had this gun for about a year. It was originally a police trade-in gun. It's chambered in 40 Smith & Wesson. So for this video I'll be giving you my general thoughts in terms of the pros and cons of it. Just kind of going through those details, and then I'll also be kind of explaining the general reason that I bought this gun and why I think it fills that role well. Alright, so first thing is I'll be showing that it's safe. So I've got nothing inside the magazine, and then I've also got nothing down inside the chamber. Alright, so I'm going to get started up with the cons that I've noticed in this gun. It's kind of a short list, but some of them may be very big issues for some folks out there. Alright, so when I first got this gun, you can see it's got a lot of scratches and wear on it and stuff like that. It kind of annoyed me. But then over time it's kind of grown on me, and I like the wear. It's added a lot of character and some, just looks more interesting than a brand new gun. Also, I'm less afraid to start dinging it up if I throw it in a holster or something like that. So it's kind of the first comment that I'll make. But in addition to this wear, I also had a lot of wear on the front and the rear sight that originally came on the gun. So like the white paint that was on the 3-dot sights was quite worn. So I decided to change it out with some Trigicon sights that you can see on here now. And when I changed it out, it was quite a long process, to be quite honest. So there's a large interference between the slide and the sights in terms of the dovetail dimensions. So that translates to needing a lot of force to physically push the sights out of those dovetails. So I actually ended up using like a very small saw to basically cut a notch into the front and the rear sight. I think it was a larger concern on the rear sight, to be honest, but basically created like a little notch inside of it, kind of folded the sight together, and then I was able to knock it out pretty easily with the rear sight removal tool at that point. And there's also kind of a disassembly process that's involved with taking out kind of the decocker slash safety that's built into the gun as well on the rear of the slide, you can see here. So it's a little bit of an involved process. It's quite a bit harder than like taking sights off a Glock or something like that. But it is something that's manageable, and if you don't want to mar up your gun, I would recommend sending it off to some sort of gunsmith, because there's a good chance you'll end up doing something to it. All right, so that's the first thing, is just the iron sights. The second aspect of that, I would say, is like if you want to get this gun cut for a red dot, I think there's some options out there for companies, but it's a much more involved process than a lot of other guns. And one of the reasons for that is you have like this roll pin here, for example, but that's less of a concern compared to, I'll make sure it's unloaded. When I pull the trigger back, you can see kind of this boss here, this pin basically protrudes up out of the slide. I think this is some sort of firing pin block safety, but I'd have to read back through the schematic. So basically, in order to physically mount a red dot, you'd have to somehow modify this pin as well. Otherwise, you wouldn't have the proper clearance for the dot to sit on there. And there's a few other components that get relatively close to where they'd be milling at. So there's probably a lot of things they have to consider. So in general, if you want to change the sights on one of these guns, it's going to be a relatively complicated process if you're buying one of these old, trade-in Px4s. It is something that can be done, but it's not something that's going to be as simple or as easy as a lot of other options out there. So that's the first set of cons that I wanted to go through with respect to the sights. The second thing I wanted to go over was the grip texture. You can see on here I've got like one of the Talon grips. These are pretty cheap, but basically you can buy grips. This one's like a very sandpaper-esque texture, maybe like 120 grit or something like that. You can also buy more like rubberized textures as well if you were considering conceal carrying this or like the compact version of this gun. So there's different options depending on what you're looking for, but the original grip texture was basically non-existent, and your hand kind of slides all over the place, especially when you're shooting something a little bit snappier like a 40. So those are the two general cons. It's kind of a short list, but those could be deal breakers depending on what you're looking for. So next I'm going to go on through some of the things that I like about the gun. The first thing is just the number of safeties on this gun is pretty impressive, and that's one of the main reasons I decided to have this be my my bedside gun. There's lots of redundancy. Like I showed earlier, there's like this pin that protrudes out. I think it's some sort of firing pin block. It's got kind of a, depending on which configuration you have, I think there's like an F and a G and a few other variants. But depending which variation you have, there's either like a safety that's built in or like a manual safety that decocks the gun. And this one, it stays inside the lower or the safe orientation unless you flick it back up. When it's in the downward position, it fully deactivates the trigger. So you can't, you can't pull the trigger. It doesn't do anything to the hammer. And then, I'll just make sure it's safety one more time. Then if you have it inside of like the safe position, of course, then you can pull the trigger, and it's a single action, also a double action. So that was single action, and then this is double action. And that's quite a stiff double action. So yeah, there's lots of safeties that are built into the gun. One thing for like newer shooters that they'll notice is like when you, it's probably a little bit frightening when you see the decocker slam down, but you'll actually notice here that the firing pin is actually multiple pieces, if I'm not mistaken. You can see that this portion of it, it actually moves up and rotates out of the way. So as the hammer's coming down, it can't physically hit on it. And there's various other safeties that are built in as well. They're in series with all that. So yeah, lots of safeties that are built in on this gun. I would have zero issues carrying one in the chamber inside of a holster if you wanted to, or like I said, for me, this is a bedside gun because it's so large. Very happy with all that. Let's see. So those are like the general safety features that are kind of built into it. There's various other ones that are on the inside of the gun that you can't see. A few other things that I like about this gun. So there are lots of options out there for modifying the trigger if you wanted to. Like I think LTT is one company that makes some different offerings for that. But the stock trigger I actually like quite a bit. So I'll put it in single action. There's a slight amount of take up here, and this is like, I don't know, probably like half a pound or less in terms of the original take up. And then when you kind of hit a wall, there's a tiny bit of creep, and then it goes off. I would say it's somewhere between 4 to 5 pounds, probably 4.5 pounds is what I would guess, but it's a very predictable trigger. It's not the best trigger in the world when you have one of these older guns like this, but in terms of going to the range, it doesn't hinder me at all in terms of being able to have pretty good groups. So I like the trigger a lot, but if you wanted to, you could also change it out. And for some people, having like a company like LTT that makes aftermarket parts is a very big pro to them. But for me, even as is, it's good. And then the ergonomics in general, I think are really, really good on this gun, especially when I have this grip texture. Pretty much everything's exactly where I want it to be when I'm holding it. So like the safety is very easy to get to. This took me a little bit of time to adjust to compared to some other guns. But if I've got it cocked back, you can basically pull it straight down, and then I'm actually going to flick my thumb straight out, and that's basically how I get it off of safe. Some people, they don't like the kind of the slide mounted safeties originally because they're trying to like manually rotate it up, kind of up like this. And it's very difficult to do that, but I find if you just push it forward, it works really, really well. And then further along with the ergonomics, like the position of the slide release is really good. I never accidentally hit it, but it's always right there, and it's not overly stiff in terms of when you're putting a new round into the chamber. And then the magazine release is in a good spot as well. I have to break my grip a tiny bit to push it. I've got larger hands. I know everybody on YouTube does apparently, but anyways, I have to break my grip a tiny bit in order to push the mag release, but it's not terrible. And then everything overall, I would say is quite good in terms of the ergonomics. I will say when you first pick up one of these, especially like the 40 Smith & Wesson version, I believe they have slightly stiffer springs. I did kind of put these ears directly into my thumb, and they're quite sharp when you first get the gun. This one was already kind of worn down a little bit, so it wasn't overly sharp, and all the burrs were kind of taken off, but it's not terrible to rack the slide either. So I think on all fronts, the ergonomics to me are quite excellent on this gun. And then one more thing that I'll comment on in terms of what I like about this gun. So it's kind of the claim to fame of the Px4 and like the Cougar series prior to the Px4 is having like a rotating barrel. You can see the barrel itself will rotate as you start to move the slide back. So you don't have like a tilting barrel. And I think this helps the recoil in two ways. For one, you don't have the barrel, which is tilting up, which is going to kind of add some sort of moment, which is going to lift kind of the whole gun up and flip it up slightly, in like a traditional 1911 or something like that. So that'll influence it in that way. And also by having the barrel rotate, you'll take some of the energy of the gun being fired, and instead of it being energy that just transferring straight back and forth, just like kind of, muzzle flip and recoil like that, and instead it'll rotate the barrel. And I think that also mitigates the recoil. So if I shoot like a similarly sized and similar weight of a gun side by side, like let's say this and some sort of Smith & Wesson, that's a 40 caliber, I noticed tremendously less recoil on this gun. I'm sure some of that's placebo, but it does seem to have a lot less muzzle flip, and I enjoy shooting this quite a bit. All right, so those are the general things that I like about this gun. I think the last thing I'll go over is just if I would buy it again for my particular use case. Like I said, I use this as kind of a bedside gun. It's quite large. It'd be kind of a pain to conceal carry this, in my opinion, but I'm sure somebody out there could. I 100% would buy this gun again. I would prefer to have known that the sights would be a very difficult thing to change before buying the gun, but regardless, it wasn't that bad to change them out, and there's lots of companies out there, gunsmiths, that can do that work for you as well if you're not comfortable with doing that type of work. But yeah, I think this has been phenomenal. I've never had any sort of issues with reliability. It's always been pretty reliable. And then in terms of 40 Smith & Wesson guns, this one's a pretty smooth shooter. So yeah, I've really liked it. If you guys have any questions or comments, feel free to put something down below. Please like and subscribe. And yeah, thank you so much for watching. Talk to you guys later. Bye.